The crisp morning air in Washington, D.C., carried a tension that was almost palpable. It was a day like any other, or so it seemed, until an announcement from the White House press secretary's office sent shockwaves across the media landscape. Karoline Leavitt, the sharp and articulate press secretary under President Donald Trump's second term, had never been one to back down from a challenge. At just 29, she had cemented herself as a powerful force in American politics, handling the press with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. Her tenure was marked by fiery exchanges, unfiltered truths, and a refusal to pander to the mainstream media's narratives. That morning, Leavitt walked confidently into the James S. Brady press briefing room, her piercing gaze sweeping across the sea of reporters waiting for their sound bites. She straightened the microphone, cleared her throat, and with a measured tone, uttered the words that would soon consume the country's political discourse. Good morning. Today, I have an important announcement regarding the conduct of public discourse in America's media landscape. The office of the president has made it clear that biased, misleading, and harmful narratives have no place in our society, especially when they masquerade as news. Effective immediately, Whoopi Goldberg has been removed from ABC's The View. A collective gasp rippled through the press corps. Cameras flashed, fingers hammered on keyboards, and whispers filled the room. A veteran reporter from CNN shot up from his chair. "Are you saying the White House had a hand in Whoopi Goldberg's termination?" he asked, his voice teetering between shock and disbelief. Leavitt's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "What I'm saying," she replied, "is that Americans deserve better than the divisive, race-baiting, and anti-American rhetoric peddled by certain individuals. We are in a new era, one where we prioritize truth, integrity, and respect in our national conversations." ABC made their choice. We made ours. The room erupted into chaos. Reporters hurled questions at her like a firing squad, demanding details, repercussions, and motives. But Leavitt was unfazed. She stood firm, exuding the same composure that had made her Trump's most trusted voice. Meanwhile, across the country, news of Whoopi Goldberg's removal from The View spread like wildfire. Social media platforms became battlegrounds, with conservatives celebrating the decision while liberals decried it as an attack on free speech. But what had led to this shocking move? And what role had the White House truly played? The answers lay in the explosive confrontation that had taken place just days earlier. A showdown between Karoline Leavitt and Whoopi Goldberg that no one saw coming. Just days before the White House's bombshell announcement, an unexpected and fiery exchange had taken place on The View, one that left the nation reeling. Whoopi Goldberg, the longtime co-host of the daytime talk show, had never been shy about her political views. With a reputation for delivering scathing critiques of conservative policies and Republican figures, she had made The View her personal battlefield. But this time she had met her match. It all started when Karoline Leavitt agreed to appear on The View as a guest. It was a rare move for a Trump administration official, given the show's overt hostility toward conservative figures. But Leavitt wasn't just another Republican spokesperson. She was a warrior in the trenches of political discourse. She knew what she was walking into, and she was ready for it. The segment began with polite introductions, but the atmosphere quickly turned icy as the discussion veered into controversial territory. Whoopi, leaning forward with her signature no-nonsense glare, wasted no time in confronting Leavitt. "Karoline, let's cut to the chase. The Trump administration is trying to rewrite history, suppress marginalized voices, and push an agenda that hurts millions of Americans. And you're the mouthpiece for it." Leavitt didn't flinch. Instead, she met Whoopi's stare with unwavering confidence. "With all due respect, Whoopi, your version of history is a carefully curated narrative designed to fit your personal beliefs. The real suppression happening in this country is against anyone who dares to challenge the mainstream liberal media. Your show has become a megaphone for misinformation and hostility toward half of America." The audience gasped. Even some of the other co-hosts, like Joy Behar and Sunny Hostin, seemed momentarily stunned by Leavitt's directness. Whoopi, clearly irritated, shot back. "Misinformation? Hostility? That's rich coming from an administration that thrives on division. Your boss, President Trump, has done more to stoke the flames of hate than any president in modern history. Leavitt leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting. You mean the same President Trump who oversaw record-low unemployment for minorities? The same Trump administration that fought for prison reform and actually got results? The difference between us, Whoopi, is that I deal in facts, while you deal in feelings. A murmur spread through the audience. Some clapped, others booed, but one thing was clear. Leavitt had shaken Whoopi in a way few had managed before. The tension was unbearable. Whoopi, visibly frustrated, attempted to regain control. So what? You're saying you know better than me? That you, a privileged conservative, have more insight into racism and oppression than someone who's actually lived it? Leavitt's response was swift and surgical. I'm saying that truth isn't determined by identity, Whoopi. Just because you've lived through experiences doesn't mean your perspective is the only one that matters. Millions of Americans, regardless of race or background, support President Trump because they see through the lies. And no amount of shouting from you is going to change that. Silence. For the first time in a long time, Whoopi Goldberg was at a loss for words. The producers scrambled to cut to a commercial break, but the damage had been done. The moment went viral within minutes, dominating social media and sparking national debates. ABC executives were flooded with calls, emails, and complaints. Conservative viewers praised Leavitt's takedown, while liberal audiences demanded action against her. The network found itself at a crossroads. Double down on Whoopi's approach or acknowledge the growing discontent with the View's one-sided political tone. The fallout would be greater than anyone expected. The moment The View returned from its abrupt commercial break, Whoopi Goldberg's frustration was evident. She forced a smile, but the tension on set was suffocating. The usually boisterous panel of co-hosts seemed rattled, their confidence shaken by Karoline Leavitt's unexpected dominance in the exchange. The audience, too, was split. Some clapped in support of Whoopi's remarks, while others murmured in admiration of Leavitt's fearlessness. But beyond the cameras, in the corporate offices of ABC, executives were in full crisis mode. By the time Leavitt left the studio, her phone was already buzzing with messages. Conservative media outlets hailed her as a warrior, while mainstream networks scrambled to frame the incident as another example of Trump world hostility. Meanwhile, Whoopi was fuming. She had faced tough guests before, but this was different. She had expected another Republican talking head who would cower under pressure. Instead, she had been met with someone who not only fought back but left her speechless in front of millions. Backstage, Whoopi vented her frustration to Joy Behar. I don't care what it takes, Joy. She's not getting the last word. We are going to fix this. Joy, equally outraged, nodded. We need to push back hard. The network better have our backs on this. But ABC was beginning to see the writing on the wall. For years, The View had enjoyed a comfortable position as a left-leaning talk show that could criticize conservatives without much consequence. But the tides were turning. Viewership had been slipping as more Americans, especially independents and moderates, grew tired of the hostility toward conservative voices. The segment with Leavitt had sparked more engagement than any episode in months, and it wasn't the kind ABC had been hoping for. Executives held a closed-door meeting that night, reviewing the backlash, social media trends, and internal concerns. The conclusion was clear: Whoopi Goldberg had become a liability. The next morning, Whoopi arrived at the studio expecting to set the record straight. She was ready to deliver a fiery monologue addressing Leavitt's comments, determined to reassert her dominance. But before she could even step onto the stage, she was pulled aside by a network executive. We need to talk, he said, his expression grim. In the dimly lit conference room, Whoopi sat across from ABC's top brass, arms crossed, ready for a fight. All right, let's hear it, she said impatiently. The executive sighed. Whoopi, the network is under immense pressure. Advertisers are concerned. Viewership is shifting. We need to make changes to keep the show viable. Whoopi narrowed her eyes. And what exactly does that mean? A heavy pause. Then, the words that would change everything. Effective immediately, we're letting you go. The room fell silent. For the first time in years, Whoopi Goldberg, the queen of The View, was speechless. Whoopi Goldberg's mind raced. She had been on The View for over 2 decades. She had weathered controversies, public backlash, and countless heated debates. But never, not in her wildest imagination, did she think she would be the one shown the door. "This is a joke, right?" she scoffed, leaning back in her chair, her arms crossed tightly. The ABC executive shook his head. "It's not a joke, Whoopi. We've looked at the numbers. The backlash from yesterday's episode was the last straw. We've been losing key advertisers, and viewer sentiment has been shifting for months. The board decided it's time for a new direction." Whoopi's face turned red with fury. "A new direction? You mean bending over for the right-wing snowflakes who can't handle the truth?" The executive sighed. "No, Whoopi. We mean broadening the conversation. Americans are tired of shows that only cater to one side. And frankly, Karoline Leavitt exposed something yesterday. We've alienated a huge portion of the audience." Whoopi slammed her fist on the table. "You're letting Trump's little mouthpiece win? You're caving to the very people who want to destroy everything this show stands for." The executive's tone remained calm but firm. "We're making a business decision, Whoopi. And the reality is your time here is up." Whoopi was livid, but deep down, she could feel the weight of inevitability crushing her. She knew the network had been uneasy about the show's political slant for a while, but she never thought they would actually do something about it. After a tense standoff, the executive slid a folder across the table. "Your legal team can review the details. You'll be compensated for the remainder of your contract, but we expect you to announce your departure by the end of the week. We're giving you the opportunity to leave on your own terms." Whoopi snatched the folder, barely glancing at it. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with sheer rage. "I built this damn show," she muttered under her breath. But the truth was undeniable. The View had become a liability, and Whoopi Goldberg was its most controversial figure. That night, as news of her departure leaked online, reactions were mixed. Conservative commentators celebrated it as a victory for balance in media, while liberal activists called it an attack on free speech. And in the White House, Karoline Leavitt received a message from an unknown number. It was a simple text.
The sun had barely risen over Washington, D.C. when Karoline Leavitt stepped into the White House press briefing room, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She was ready for the inevitable barrage of questions about Whoopi Goldberg's shocking removal from The View. The media had gone into a frenzy overnight. CNN and Mintzberg framed it as an attack on free speech, while conservative outlets called it a much-needed correction to media bias. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like #LeavittWins trending worldwide. Standing at the podium, Leavitt adjusted her notes and faced the eager press corps. "I'll take your questions," she said, her voice steady. The first hand shot up Jim Acosta from CNN, his expression smug. "Karoline, many are calling this a blatant case of political interference. Did the White House pressure ABC to fire Whoopi Goldberg?" Leavitt smirked, as if she had been waiting for this exact question. "Let me be crystal clear, the White House does not dictate programming decisions for private networks. But let's not pretend that Whoopi Goldberg was some unbiased journalist. She spent years spreading misinformation, attacking conservative voices, and silencing those who dared to challenge her. The American people have spoken. They want balance. ABC made a business decision based on that reality." Another reporter, this time from the New York Times, jumped in. "But don't you think this sets a dangerous precedent? A government official debates TV host, and days later that host is gone?" Leavitt's response was swift. "The only precedent being set here is that no one is above accountability, not even Whoopi Goldberg. For too long, media elites have controlled the narrative without challenge. That era is over." The press room exploded with questions, but Leavitt held her ground, fielding each one with the precision of a seasoned strategist. By the end of the briefing, Even her critics couldn't deny it. She had come out on top. Meanwhile, over at ABC Studios, Whoopi Goldberg was packing up her dressing room. The walls, once adorned with framed photos of her triumphs, now felt empty. The network had given her the option to make a farewell statement, but she had refused. "I'm not giving them the satisfaction," she muttered as she tossed a stack of papers into a box. Joy Behar, her closest ally on The View, entered the room, her face somber. "I can't believe they did this to you," she said softly. Whoopi sighed. "Believe it, Joy. The game has changed, and we didn't see it coming." As she walked out of the studio for the last time, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions at her. She ignored them, slipping into a black SUV and driving away from the set she had ruled for decades. Back in the White House, President Trump himself was watching the coverage. Sitting behind the resolute desk, he leaned back and grinned. "Leavitt's got guts," he said. Turning to his aides, "We need more of that in Washington." And just like that, a new era had begun, one where conservative voices weren't just fighting back, but winning.